The relentless afternoon sun beat down on Gabriel Lawson's back as he watched the woman from a distance, her slender figure bent over freshly tilled soil, hands working methodically to plant corn seeds in what most folks would call a fool's errand. This land hadn't yielded a proper crop in 3 seasons, not since the drought had turned Montana Territory's fertile soil to dust in the unforgiving summer of 1876. Gabriel adjusted his hat, squinting across the barren field. He'd ridden past this homestead a dozen times in the last month, each time expecting to find it abandoned like so many others. But there she was again, stubbornly pushing seeds into the parched earth, as if sheer will could summon rain clouds. He should have ridden on. The Circle L Ranch needed his attention, especially with cattle thieves growing bold in these parts. But something about her determination made him rein in his horse, Maverick, and dismount at the edge of her property. "Madam," Gabriel called, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "Don't mean to intrude, but that soil ain't likely to give you much return." The woman straightened, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun, the other clutching a small cloth sack of corn seeds. Her dress, once blue perhaps, had faded to the same dusty gray as the land around them. "I don't recall asking for your assessment, mister," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. As Gabriel drew closer, he noticed details that distance had obscured: the determined set of her jaw, the wisps of auburn hair escaping her bonnet, and eyes the deep green of river moss. Despite the dirt smudged across her face, she was strikingly beautiful. "Gabriel Lawson. I run cattle on the Circle L, just north of here." He removed his hat in a gesture of respect. "And you would be?" She hesitated, assessing him with those remarkable eyes before answering. "Victoria Northcott. This is my land now." The way she said it suggested there was a story behind those simple words. "Well, Miss Northcott, Mrs.," she corrected, though Gabriel noticed no ring on her finger. "Though my husband has passed." Gabriel nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Northcott, I don't mean to discourage you, but this land hasn't seen proper rain in nearly 3 years. The soil's lost its life." Victoria returned to her planting, pushing another seed into the ground with a deliberate motion. "Mr. Lawson, everything that appears dead isn't necessarily so. Sometimes it's just waiting for someone stubborn enough to coax it back to life." Gabriel couldn't help but smile at that. "You planning to make it rain through sheer determination?" "If that's what it takes." She straightened again, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "My father taught me about farming in Virginia. Said good land never truly dies. It just needs the right touch. Virginia's a long way from Montana Territory." Victoria's expression clouded slightly. "War changes things, changes people. After Appomattox, there wasn't much left for us there." Gabriel understood. The war had scattered people across the continent, himself included. He'd ridden west at 18, leaving behind a Tennessee home that no longer felt like his own after Union troops had burned it to the ground. "Well, Mrs. Northcott, I admire your spirit, but spirit don't make corn grow in dust." Gabriel gestured to the nearly empty water barrel by her modest cabin. "Your well running dry?" Victoria's prideful stance faltered slightly. "It's sufficient." "That's not what I asked." "The well is lower than I'd like," she admitted. "But there's enough for me and what the crops need until the rains come." Gabriel suppressed a laugh. "The rains? Madam, I've been here 6 years, and I've never seen a drought this persistent." "Then perhaps you've not been looking at the sky properly, Mr. Lawson." Victoria turned back to her planting. "Now, if you'll excuse me, daylight's wasting." Gabriel knew dismissal when he heard it. He replaced his hat, tipped the brim slightly, and returned to his horse. As he mounted, he took one last look at Victoria Northcott, stubbornly pushing seeds into unyielding earth. "Mighty peculiar woman," he muttered to Maverick as they rode away. 3 days later, Gabriel found himself inexplicably riding past the Northcott homestead again. He told himself it was merely on his way to town, though it added nearly 40 minutes to his journey. To his surprise, Victoria was no longer alone in her efforts. A wooden contraption stood in her yard, some kind of catchment system for the morning dew, he realized as he drew closer. And she had dug what appeared to be shallow trenches throughout the field, creating a pattern he didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of him, and he turned Maverick toward the cabin. Victoria looked up from her work, recognition flashing across her face. "Back to tell me I'm wasting my time, Mr. Lawson." "Just passing by," Gabriel said, dismounting. "Interesting setup you've got here." Victoria wiped her hands on her apron. "My father's design. It collects dew and funnels it to the field. Not as good as rain, but better than nothing." Gabriel examined the wooden structure with newfound respect. "And these trenches? They'll direct what little water comes to where it's needed most. The Iroquois taught settlers this method back east." Gabriel nodded slowly. "Clever, but even with this, you'll need rain." "Yes, I'm aware." Victoria's lips curved into a small smile. "I have faith it will come." "Faith doesn't make clouds, Mrs. Northcott." "No, but a woman's got to have something to hold on to out here." She gestured to the horizon. "This land, it speaks to me, tells me not to give up on it." Gabriel studied her face, wondering if the isolation had affected her mind, but her eyes were clear and intelligent, not the eyes of someone who'd lost touch with reality. "Well, if you're determined to see this through, at least let me help you with that water barrel. My creek's still running. I can bring you a wagon load every few days." Victoria's expression turned suspicious. "And what would you want in return?" The question stung, but Gabriel understood her caution. A widow alone on the frontier had every reason to be wary of a man's intentions. "Nothing, madam, just being neighborly." She studied him a moment longer. "I can pay you." "That won't be necessary." "I insist. I may not have much, but I won't accept charity." Gabriel recognized the pride in her stance. "All right, then. You can pay me with a portion of your crop." He smiled. "If it grows." "When it grows," she corrected, and for the first time, Gabriel saw a genuine smile transform her face. The next morning, Gabriel arrived with his wagon and 4 barrels of water. He found Victoria already at work, her sleeves rolled up as she tended to her irrigation trenches. "You're up early," he commented, jumping down from the wagon. "Sun doesn't wait for the weary," she replied, straightening. "I appreciate this, Mr. Lawson." "Gabriel," he corrected. "If we're to be business partners in this corn venture, we might as well use our given names." She hesitated before nodding. "Victoria, then." As they worked together to empty the water barrels into her storage containers, Gabriel learned more about the widow Northcott. She'd been married for just 2 years before her husband, Thomas, had succumbed to pneumonia during their journey west. The homestead had been his dream, one she was determined to fulfill despite his absence. "He wanted to build something that would last," she explained as they finished with the last barrel. "Something that would grow." "And you think corn is that something?" Gabriel asked. Victoria looked out over the dusty field. "It's a start. This land needs life brought back to it." Over the next 3 weeks, Gabriel made water deliveries every 3rd day. Each time, he found himself lingering a little longer, helping Victoria with repairs to her cabin, or offering advice on keeping predators away from her small flock of chickens. He learned that she played the piano beautifully, though she no longer had one, and that she could recite Shakespeare from memory. She'd been educated at a fine ladies' school in Richmond before the war changed everything. In return, he told her about his life in Tennessee, his journey west, and how he'd built the Circle L from nothing but determination and hard work. "Not so different from planting corn in dust," Victoria observed one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "I suppose not," Gabriel admitted, surprised by the insight. By mid-May, against all odds, tiny green shoots began to emerge from Victoria's field. Gabriel couldn't believe his eyes when she proudly showed him the first sprouts. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, kneeling to inspect the delicate plants. "How did you manage this?" Victoria's eyes shone with triumph. "Faith, Mr. Lawson." "And a little bit of science." She explained how she'd soaked the seeds in a special solution. Her father had developed a mixture of water, animal blood, and certain herbs that helped seeds thrive in harsh conditions. "The Iroquois technique for the trenches, my father's dew catchment system, and my own stubbornness," she said with a smile. "Sometimes old knowledge combined with new ideas makes miracles happen." Gabriel found himself staring at her, struck by the intelligence and determination that radiated from her. In that moment, something shifted inside him, an admiration that was quickly growing into something deeper. As May turned to June, Victoria's corn continued to grow despite the persistent drought. Gabriel's water deliveries became a fixture in both their lives, and he found himself spending more time at her homestead than his own ranch. His foreman, Hank Mills, noticed his distraction. "Boss, you sweet on that widow woman?" he asked one evening as they rode back to the Circle L. Gabriel couldn't deny it. "She's something special, Hank. Never met anyone like her. Just be careful. Frontier's a harsh place for hopes and dreams." But Gabriel's hopes continued to grow alongside Victoria's corn. In mid-June, as the plants reached knee-height, dark clouds finally gathered on the horizon. Victoria stood in her field, face turned toward the approaching storm. "See," she said when Gabriel rode up, "the land was just waiting." The rain came down in sheets, turning dust to mud in minutes. Victoria laughed, spreading her arms wide and spinning in the downpour. Gabriel joined her, caught up in her joy, and when she slipped in the newly formed mud, he caught her. Their faces were inches apart, rain streaming down their cheeks. Without thinking, Gabriel leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. For a heartbeat, she stiffened, but then she was kissing him back, her hands gripping his soaked shirt. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Victoria's eyes were wide with conflicting emotions. "I'm sorry," Gabriel said immediately. "That was presumptuous of me." Victoria shook her head, raindrops flying from her hair. "No, it's just, I haven't felt this way since Thomas. I didn't think I ever would again. I understand if it's too soon. It's been 3 years," she said softly. "And yet, I still feel guilty." Gabriel took her hand. "We don't have to rush anything. I just want you to know that I admire you, Victoria Northcott, more than I've ever admired anyone." The rain continued to fall, nourishing the parched earth as they stood together in the middle of Victoria's improbable cornfield, hands linked, possibilities unfolding between them like the tender green leaves reaching for the sky. The summer of 1876 brought changes neither of them had anticipated. The rains, once started, continued with surprising regularity. Victoria's corn thrived, growing taller each week until by early July. The plants stood shoulder high, their leaves a vibrant green against the recovering landscape. Gabriel continued his visits, no longer under the pretense of delivering water. They took to having supper together most evenings, sometimes at her cabin, other times at the main house of the Circle L. His ranch hands exchanged knowing glances, but said nothing directly to their boss about the widow, who was clearly capturing his heart. One warm evening in late July, they sat on Victoria's porch, watching fireflies dance above the cornfield as the day's heat slowly dissipated. "My father would be amazed," Victoria said, her voice soft with nostalgia. "He always said land would respond to love as readily as any living creature." Gabriel looked at her profile in the fading light. "Is that what you've given this place? Love?" Victoria turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I've given it everything I had left after Thomas died. Maybe that's the same thing." "And now?" Gabriel asked, his heart beating faster. "Now I find I have more to give than I realized." Her hand found his in the gathering darkness. "You've helped me see that, Gabriel." He brought her fingers to his lips. "Victoria, A distant rumble of hoofbeats interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Both of them tensed, listening as the sound grew louder. "Are you expecting anyone?" Gabriel asked, standing and moving protectively in front of her. Victoria shook her head, reaching for the shotgun she kept beside the door. 3 riders appeared at the edge of her property, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Gabriel recognized them immediately, the Blackwell brothers, notorious troublemakers who'd been pushing the boundaries of the law for years. "Stay here," he told Victoria, but she was already beside him, shotgun in hand. "It's my property they're on," she said firmly. The riders approached slowly, and Gabriel could make out Eli Blackwell's sneering face in the lead. "Well, if it ain't Lawson," Eli called as they drew closer. "Heard you've been spending time with the widow woman. Didn't believe it until now." Gabriel's hand instinctively moved to the pistol at his hip. "State your business, Blackwell." Eli dismounted, followed by his brothers, Seth and Noah, All three men had the same mean look in their eyes that had caused trouble throughout the territory. "Just being neighborly," Eli said, his gaze moving to Victoria and lingering in a way that made Gabriel's blood boil. "Wanted to see this miracle cornfield folks in town are talking about." Victoria stepped forward. "You've seen it. Now I'll thank you to leave my property." Eli laughed, a harsh sound in the peaceful evening. "Feisty, ain't she? I like that in a woman." He turned to Gabriel. "You staking a claim here, Lawson? 'Cause I've been thinking this might be a nice piece of land to add to our holdings." "This land isn't for sale," Victoria said before Gabriel could respond. "And I don't appreciate uninvited guests after sundown." Seth Blackwell spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Ain't about selling, madam. Some folks just find living out here all alone. Uncomfortable, dangerous even. Things happen. Fires start. Animals go missing." Gabriel moved forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Blackwell." "Just stating facts," Eli replied with a shrug. "Frontier's a harsh place for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Gabriel said firmly. "No?" Eli's gaze shifted between them. "You moving in, Lawson? Or just visiting her bed?" Gabriel's fist connected with Eli's jaw before the man could react, sending him stumbling backward. Seth and Noah immediately reached for their guns, but Victoria's shotgun blast over their heads froze them in place. "The next one won't go high," she warned, her voice steady as she levered another shell into the chamber. Eli wiped blood from his split lip, his eyes narrowing. "You've made a mistake, both of you?" "The mistake was riding onto my land uninvited," Victoria replied. "Now get out, and don't come back." The three brothers retreated, mounting their horses with dark looks of promise. Eli was the last to turn away. "This ain't over," he called as they rode off. When the sound of hoofbeats had faded, Victoria lowered the shotgun, her hands trembling slightly. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Gabriel nodded, taking the shotgun from her and setting it aside. "Not tonight, but yes, eventually. The Blackwells don't take kindly to being stood up to. What do they want with my land? It's not particularly special." Gabriel sighed, leading her back to the porch. "It's not about the land. Eli Blackwell has been trying to push out smaller ranchers and homesteaders for years. He wants to control the whole valley. And my cornfield is what? An affront to his plans? Your success is, if you can make this land productive, others might follow. The Blackwells don't want independent farmers and ranchers prospering here." Gabriel took her hands in his. "Victoria, I think you should stay at the Circle L tonight, just to be safe." She pulled her hands away. "I will not be chased from my home by threats, Gabriel. This is my land. I've put my sweat and tears into it, and I won't abandon it. I'm not suggesting you abandon it. Just be cautious." Victoria's expression softened. "I appreciate your concern, but I've faced worse than the likes of Eli Blackwell." Gabriel knew there would be no swaying her. "Then I'll stay here tonight. People will talk. Let them. I'd rather face gossip than the thought of you here alone if the Blackwells return." Victoria considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right. But you'll sleep on the porch." Gabriel smiled. "Yes, madam." That night became the first of many where Gabriel stood watch over Victoria's homestead. By day, he tended to Circle L business. By night, he returned to her cabin. Sometimes they talked until the stars wheeled overhead, sharing stories and dreams. Other times, they simply sat in companionable silence, watching her corn grow taller with each passing day. 2 weeks after the Blackwells' visit, Gabriel arrived at Victoria's cabin to find her examining something at the edge of her cornfield. "What is it?" he asked, dismounting quickly. Victoria pointed to several corn stalks that had been deliberately cut down and trampled. "A warning," she said grimly. "They want me to know they can get to my crops." Gabriel surveyed the damage, anger building inside him. "This ends now. What are you going to do?" "Talk to Sheriff Patterson in town. The Blackwells have been pushing boundaries for too long." Victoria shook her head. "Patterson won't do anything. Everyone knows he takes money from the Blackwells to look the other way." "Then I'll handle it myself." "No." Victoria grabbed his arm. "That's what they want, an excuse to come after you directly. We need to be smarter than that." Gabriel admired her calm reasoning, even as frustration burned within him. We can't just let them continue to threaten you. We won't. Victoria's eyes held a determined gleam. But first, we need allies. How many other ranchers and homesteaders have the Blackwells pushed around? Gabriel thought about it. At least a dozen families in the last year alone. The Thompsons lost their place after mysterious fires kept starting. The Mendozas were run off when their water source suddenly dried up, diverted, most likely. Then we need to unite them. Strengthen numbers, Gabriel. Over the next week, Gabriel discreetly contacted neighboring ranchers and farmers who had suffered at the Blackwells' hands. Many were hesitant to stand against the brothers openly, but the sight of Victoria's thriving cornfield proof that the land could be reclaimed from drought with enough determination inspired some to reconsider. By early August, Victoria's corn stood tall and proud, tassels waving in the summer breeze. The first ears were forming, promising a harvest that few had believed possible when she'd first pushed those seeds into the dust-dry soil. It was on a particularly hot afternoon that disaster struck. Gabriel was at the far end of his property when one of his hands came riding hard toward him. "Boss, fire at the Northcott place!" Gabriel's heart nearly stopped. He spurred Maverick to a gallop, racing toward Victoria's homestead, with fear clawing at his throat. Long before he arrived, he could see the thick black smoke rising into the sky. The cornfield was ablaze, flames consuming the carefully tended plants that Victoria had nurtured through drought and adversity. Gabriel searched desperately for her as he rode onto the property, calling her name. He found her at the well, frantically drawing water to fill buckets. Her face was smudged with soot, her dress singed at the hem. "Victoria!" He leaped from Maverick, rushing to her side. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. "They waited until I went to check the chicken coop. By the time I saw the smoke, half the field was already burning." Gabriel looked at the inferno that was consuming her dreams. "We need to get you to safety." "No, we need to save what we can." Victoria thrust a bucket into his hands. "The north side hasn't caught yet. If we can wet it down..." "Victoria, it's too late." Gabriel set the bucket aside and took her shoulders gently. "The field is lost." She stared at him, refusing to accept his words. "I can't just let it burn. All that work. Your life is worth more than corn." Gabriel pulled her away from the well as a gust of wind sent flames leaping higher. "The Blackwells did this. They could still be watching, waiting to see if you survived." This seemed to penetrate Victoria's desperate focus. She allowed Gabriel to lead her to Maverick, but as he helped her mount, she looked back at her burning field. "They think this will break me," she said, her voice suddenly calm and cold. "They're wrong." Gabriel mounted behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist as he turned Maverick toward the Circle L. "We'll make them pay for this, I promise you." At the ranch, Gabriel's housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, helped Victoria clean up and change into borrowed clothes while Gabriel gathered his men. He sent riders to alert the other ranchers and homesteaders who had agreed to stand with them against the Blackwells. By nightfall, Victoria had recovered her composure, though grief still shadowed her eyes. She sat at Gabriel's kitchen table as men began to arrive, responding to his call. "They burned out the widow Northcott today," Gabriel told the assembled group. "Tomorrow, it could be any one of you." Jacob Thompson, who had lost his own ranch to the Blackwells' tactics, stepped forward. "What do you propose we do, Lawson? The sheriff won't help us." "We don't need the sheriff. We need each other." Gabriel looked at the determined faces around him. "The Blackwells are just 3 men. They've controlled this valley through fear, picking us off one by one. But together, we outnumber them 20 to 1. Victoria stood, drawing all eyes to her. "I didn't come west to be bullied off my land. My husband died believing in the dream of making something grow here. Today, the Blackwells burn my corn, but they can't burn my determination." Her words sparked murmurs of agreement among the men. "Tomorrow at dawn," Gabriel continued, "we ride to Blackwell Ranch, all of us. We make it clear that their reign of terror is over. They can live peacefully as neighbors, or they can leave." "And if they refuse?" asked Hank Mills. Gabriel's expression hardened. "Then we'll be prepared to defend ourselves and our homes." The next morning, 30 riders assembled at the Circle L. Victoria insisted on joining them, despite Gabriel's protests. "This is my fight as much as anyone's," she said firmly, mounting the mare Gabriel had provided for her. More so, perhaps. As they rode toward Blackwell Ranch, Gabriel kept close to Victoria's side. "Stay near me," he told her. "If shooting starts—" "It won't," she replied with surprising confidence. "The Blackwells are bullies, and bullies back down when confronted by superior force." Gabriel hoped she was right. The Blackwell compound came into view as the sun climbed above the eastern hills. It was an imposing place, a large main house surrounded by well-built outbuildings, all constructed with lumber that had to have been hauled at great expense from far away. Eli and his brothers emerged onto their porch as the riders approached, rifles in hand. Their faces registered shock at the size of the group before them. "What's this, Lawson?" Eli called, his voice carrying a hint of unease despite his attempt at bravado. "Bringing an army to my door?" Gabriel urged Maverick forward a few paces. "Not an army, Blackwell. Neighbors. People who are tired of living in fear of you and your brothers." Eli's gaze found Victoria. "I see you survived the fire, Mrs. Northcott. Unfortunate accident, that." "There was nothing accidental about it," Victoria replied, her voice steady. "Just as there was nothing accidental about the Thompson fires or the Mendoza water problems, or any of the other misfortunes that have plagued honest people in this valley." Seth Blackwell raised his rifle slightly. "You're trespassing, all of you." "No," said Jacob Thompson, moving his horse forward to join Gabriel and Victoria. "We're serving notice. Your days of terrorizing this valley are over." Noah Blackwell spat. "Big talk from a man who couldn't even protect his own property." "That was before," Thompson replied. "This is now. We stand together." Eli looked over the assembled group, clearly calculating his odds. 30 armed men and one determined woman presented a force he couldn't hope to defeat. "What exactly are you proposing, Lawson?" he asked, his tone more cautious now. "Simple. You live peacefully as legitimate ranchers, respecting your neighbor's property and rights, or you leave the territory. Those are your only options." For a tense moment, it seemed the Blackwells might choose violence despite the odds. Then Eli lowered his rifle slightly. "And if we agree to your terms, then we all ride away today, and tomorrow starts a new chapter in this valley," Gabriel said. "But understand this, we're watching, all of us. One step out of line, one more accident, and we'll be back. And next time, we won't be offering choices." Victoria urged her horse forward until she was directly in front of Eli. "You burned my corn, Mr. Blackwell. You thought that would destroy me, drive me away. But what you don't understand is that those plants taught me something important. Life finds a way, even in the harshest conditions, if you're determined enough." Eli stared at her, something like grudging respect flickering across his face. "You have until sundown to decide," Gabriel called. "We'll be waiting for your answer in town." With that, he signaled the riders to withdraw. As they rode away, Victoria remained straight-backed and proud beside him. "Do you think they'll agree?" she asked, when the Blackwell Ranch was no longer in sight. "They'd be fools not to," Gabriel replied. "And whatever else they may be, the Blackwells aren't fools." By late afternoon, word came that the Blackwell brothers had been seen loading wagons with their personal belongings. By evening, they were gone, leaving their ranch behind, rather than submit to their neighbors' terms. The valley celebrated that night, gathering at the Circle L for an impromptu feast. Victoria moved through the crowd, accepting condolences for her lost crop, but refusing to dwell on the destruction. "There will be other seasons," she told everyone who expressed sympathy, "and now we'll all be able to grow and thrive without fear." Later, as the celebration wound down, Gabriel found Victoria standing alone on his porch, looking up at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her. "I was thinking about how much has changed since I first put those corn seeds in the ground," she replied. "Back then, I was alone, clinging to a dead husband's dream, because I had nothing else." Gabriel leaned against the porch railing. "And now?" Victoria turned to face him. "Now I have my own dreams, and they're very much alive." "Care to share those dreams?" Gabriel asked, his heart quickening. Victoria stepped closer to him. "They involve this valley, making things grow, building something that lasts." Her hand found his. "And they involve you, Gabriel Lawson, if you're interested." Gabriel drew her into his arms. I'm more than interested, Victoria Northcott. I'm completely devoted to the idea. When he kissed her this time, there was no hesitation, only a sweet certainty that they had both found something more precious than either had expected when she first pushed those corn seeds into the dust. 1 year later, in the summer of 1877, Victoria stood in her field, watching as Gabriel helped their neighbors harvest the abundant corn crop that had sprung from the ashes of last year's destruction. The valley had transformed in the months since the Blackwells' departure. Families who had been driven away returned to reclaim abandoned homesteads. New settlers arrived, drawn by stories of fertile land and neighborly cooperation. The Circle L and the Northcott homestead had effectively merged, with Gabriel and Victoria having married in a joyful ceremony the previous autumn. Their combined lands now formed the heart of a thriving community. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Gabriel said, joining Victoria at the edge of the cornfield. His shirt was damp with sweat from the day's work, his face tanned from long hours under the Montana sun. "It is," Victoria agreed, leaning into him as his arm circled her waist. "Though I think I have an even more impressive crop to show you." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "More impressive than this corn that everyone said would never grow?" Victoria took his hand and placed it gently on her slightly rounded stomach. "Much more impressive. This one's been growing for about 3 months now." Gabriel's eyes widened, joy spreading across his face. "Victoria, are you saying—" She nodded, her own eyes shining. "By winter we'll have a new addition to our family." Gabriel let out a whoop that startled the workers in the field, lifting Victoria and spinning her around before setting her gently back on her feet. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm carrying precious cargo." "The most precious," Gabriel agreed, his voice thick with emotion as he placed his hand once more on her stomach. "When I first saw you planting corn in the dust, I thought you were chasing an impossible dream." Victoria smiled, covering his hand with her own. "And now? Now I know better? You weren't just growing corn. You were growing hope, growing a future." He kissed her tenderly. "Growing more than I ever thought possible." Victoria looked out over the golden field, remembering the dust and despair of that first planting. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the most important growth isn't what you can see in the fields. It's what happens inside us when we refuse to give up." Gabriel nodded, understanding completely. "You've taught me that, Victoria, you and your impossible corn." Together they stood at the edge of the thriving field, the past year's struggles behind them, the promise of new life growing within Victoria, and the certainty that whatever challenges the frontier might still hold, they would face them together as resilient and determined as the first green shoots that had defied all odds to rise from the dust.